So for this video, I will be talking about the prophecy of Ezra's eagle, which is an apocryphal prophecy about the last days, or in other words, that means it's in the Apocrypha. Now, what is the Apocrypha? Well, it's a collection of books and it was part of the original King James Version of the Bible back in 1611. It was originally found in between the Old and New Testaments. And it was removed from the Bible by the Church of England in 1885. So that means that the Pilgrims had it with them in their Bible when they sailed to America on the Mayflower in 1620. It was in the Bible that George Washington placed his hand on when he was first sworn in as President of the United States. The pioneers even had it with them in their Bibles when they crossed the plains in the mid-1800s. And the timing of its removal is interesting because it happened about 40 years before the prophecy of Ezra's eagle began to be fulfilled. Now, who was Ezra? Well, he is the prophet who received and recorded the prophecy of Ezra's eagle, hence the name. He was taken captive into Babylon around 600 BC from Jerusalem, and it was in Babylon around that time where he received the prophecy. He was the brother of the Old Testament prophet Daniel. This is the same Daniel who was also taken captive into Babylon around 600 BC, interpreted the dream for King Nebuchadnezzar, and then, much later on in his life, he survived the lion's den. That Daniel. I bring him up because the prophecy of Ezra's eagle was meant to supplement King Nebuchadnezzar's dream that Daniel interpreted. Now, what is the prophecy of Ezra's eagle? Well, first of all, it's located in the Apocrypha, like I said, in the book of 2nd Esdras, and Esdras is just the Greek name for Ezra, and it's in chapters 11 and 12 in that book. It's a prophecy about the last days. It appears to speak specifically about the United States. Now, chapter 11 is where Ezra talks about what he saw in the vision he had. And chapter 12 is where Ezra was asking the angel who was ministering to him questions about what he saw in the vision, and the angel was answering his questions. Now, before I get into the prophecy, I want to speak briefly about a man named Michael B. Rush. I'm going to talk more about him later in this video, but for now, all you need to know is that he is an LDS scholar and author who is credited with being the first to correctly interpret the prophecy of Ezra's eagle. And it's his interpretation of this prophecy that I'm about to share with you. He does not claim to be a prophet. He's just a guy who likes searching the scriptures and writing about what he finds. I think his interpretation of the prophecy is worth hearing out, because we will know pretty soon if he's correct. I'll explain how we'll know later. Before I move on to the prophecy, just a quick disclaimer. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so that's my religious background. Most of the scriptures I cite will be in the Apocrypha and the Bible, but towards the end I will read a couple of things that are unique to my own faith. Just so you're aware, that is where I'm coming from. Now, on to the prophecy. So we'll begin with talking about what Ezra saw. He said he saw an eagle, but it was not a normal eagle. It was an eagle with 3 heads and 20 feathers. This eagle represents a kingdom that is thought to be the United States. The 20 feathers are said to represent 20 different kings, or presidents, if we're talking about the United States, that the kingdom will have. 12 of the feathers are longer, normal length feathers that represent kings who reigned for as long as they were supposed to, according to the voice of the people. And the other 8 feathers are shorter feathers that represent kings, or presidents, who had their administrations cut short by unnatural means, often involving the interference of secret combinations. And we think we know who the first 16 of these 20 feathers are, and I'll get into who they supposedly are in a second. But first, I want to talk briefly about the 3 eagle heads. For most of the timeline of the prophecy, the 3 eagle heads are asleep. And they're going to wake up later, and we will get into that and into what they supposedly mean. But for now, just remember that the 3 eagle heads are asleep. Now, on to the feathers. So the first feather is thought to be Herbert Hoover. And the verse and reading from 2nd Esdras, chapter 11, verse 12, it says about him, And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose one feather, Herbert Hoover, and reigned over all the earth. Now, it's thought to be about Herbert Hoover because of what the prophecy says about the second feather. And the description of the king, represented by the second feather, sounds a lot like Franklin Roosevelt. And reading from the prophecy again, it says, "And so it was that when it, the first feather, reigned, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next following, the second feather, stood up, and reigned, and had a great time," which in Old English that just means he reigned for a long time. "And it happened that when it reigned, the end of it came also, like as the first, so that it appeared no more. Then came there a voice unto it, and said, Hear thou that hast borne rule over the earth so long, this I say unto thee, before thou beginnest to appear no more, this is the key part, there shall none after thee attain unto thy time, neither unto the half thereof." And this repeats itself in the following chapter. It says, "Whereof the second shall begin to reign, and shall have more time than any of the 12. And that perfectly fits the description of Herbert Hoover. He's the only president who's been elected to 4 terms in office. And after his 4th term, a new amendment was passed in the Constitution, which limited presidents to only being able to hold office for 2 terms, thereby fulfilling the prophecy. Now at this point, you might be wondering, why start the prophecy with Herbert Hoover? Well, you need to understand that the purpose of Ezra's eagle is not to say whether each president was good or evil. The purpose of the prophecy is to illustrate how secret combinations would interfere with the government of the United States in the last days. There is a book titled None Dare Call It Conspiracy, written by Gary Allen, which Ezra Taft Benson recommended while speaking in General Conference in April 1972. The book talks about how Herbert Hoover was a founder of a group, or secret combination, in the government that has been running things in the background ever since then. Based on this information, it appears that Herbert Hoover helped kick these events off. So to recap, the first 2 feathers are Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt, and they are both longer feathers. They were not removed from office early by unnatural means. And the same is true with the 3rd and 4th feathers. And they are Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower. Both of them are also longer feathers, and their terms did not end early by unnatural means. Then we have the 5th feather, who is thought to be John F. Kennedy. And he was the first short feather. His time in office was cut short due to the interference of secret combinations. And that's because he wasn't doing everything that the secret combinations wanted him to do. And Congress passed a law back in 1992 that was supposed to require the CIA to release all of its files that it has on the JFK assassination within 25 years, but they still haven't all been released. And it's been over 30 years now. Kind of interesting, right? So moving on, the 6th feather was, of course, Lyndon Johnson. And he ended up being a long feather because there was no secret combination intervention that removed him from office early. Then we have the 7th feather, who was Richard Nixon, and he was the 2nd short feather. And like Kennedy, the secret combinations mobilized to remove him from office. Only in his case, it was done with the mainstream media reporting on him negatively until he was eventually forced to resign. So then we have the 8th to the 14th feathers. And those are Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. They were all long feathers. They were all in office for as long as they were supposed to be, according to the voice of the people. Then we have the 15th feather, who is Donald Trump, and he was the 3rd short feather. And what the prophecy says about him is, "And I beheld, and lo, there was one," Donald Trump, "set up. But shortly it appeared no more." 2 Ezra chapter 11, verse 26. So like Kennedy and Nixon, his time in office was cut short by the interference of secret combinations. But in his case, President Trump was removed from office by means that I can't really talk about out loud on social media, so you can just read what I've said here. But I will give you some interesting facts about the 2020 election. There was a big push for mail-in voting beforehand. Some states took a break from counting in the middle of the night on election night, and that had never been done before. And Joe Biden somehow got 81 million votes, the most votes a president has ever gotten, despite having low attendance at his rallies, while President Trump was able to fill entire arenas for his rallies. The mainstream media has strongly condemned people who question the results of the 2020 election, dubbing the idea that it was rigged the big lie. Video evidence has been released in 2023 that shows that January 6th was a setup in order to make President Trump look bad. President Trump even posted a video on YouTube telling the January 6th protesters to go home, but YouTube quickly removed it because he said that one thing about the 2020 election that you're not supposed to say. So now we have the 16th feather, who you can probably guess is Joe Biden. And he is the 4th short feather. And the remainder of the feathers will be short moving forward. And what the prophecy says about him is, and the 2nd, Joe Biden, was away sooner than the 1st, Donald Trump. 2nd Ezra chapter 11, verse 27. So based on the above verse, it sounds like Joe Biden will be in office for less time than Donald Trump was. So if he leaves office even a day before Inauguration Day in 2025, that will fulfill the prophecy. So what's supposed to happen next? Let's talk about the 17th and 18th feathers. And what the prophecy says about them is, and I beheld, and lo, the two that remained, the 17th and 18th feathers, thought also in themselves to reign. Or, in other words, they thought in themselves to be president. And when they so thought, behold, there awaked one of the eagle heads that were at rest. This is where one of the eagle heads wakes up, namely, it that was in the midst, for it that was greater than the two other heads. 2nd Ezra chapter 11, verses 28 and 29. Now, who are these two feathers? Well, right now, we don't know for sure, but they could be Kamala Harris and Kevin McCarthy, only because they're the next two people in the presidential line of succession. They could also be the winner of the 2024 election and his or her running mate. It will probably be more obvious who these people are if and when these events come to pass. Based on what the prophecy says, they will be on track to be president, but something is going to stop them. And the thing that stops them will involve the awakening of the first eagle head. So who or what are the three eagle heads? Well, based on what the prophecy says, each of these three eagle heads will be an individual person. An unprecedented event or set of events might be what causes them to rise to power, like a 9/11 kind of event. Now, what do we know about the first eagle head specifically? Well, reading from the prophecy again, it says, and when they, the 17th and 18th feathers, so thought to reign, behold, there awaked one of the heads that were at rest, namely, it that was in the midst, for that was greater than the other two heads. And then I saw that the two other heads were joined with it, and behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the two feathers under the wing that would have reigned. But this head put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all those that dwelt upon the earth with much oppression. And it had the governance of the world more than all the wings that had been. And after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings, or feathers. 2nd Ezra chapter 11, verses 29 through 33. We also believe that the three eagle heads are spoken of in Daniel 11. Verses 15 and 16 in that chapter are thought to talk about the first eagle head. And they say, so the king of the north, the first eagle head, shall come, and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities. And the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So based on these verses, and others in Daniel 11, Michael B. Rush believes that the first eaglehead will wage war on a country in the Middle East, with the most likely candidate being Iran. And he thinks that a 9/11 kind of event could be what motivates the eaglehead to attack the Middle East, possibly an event that wipes out everyone in the presidential line of succession in Washington, D.C., paving the way for the eagleheads to take over. And the eaglehead will more than likely blame the event on a country in the Middle East and take the United States to war there. And reading from the prophecy again, it says, And whereas thou sawest the great head appear no more, it signifieth that one of them shall die upon his bed, and yet with pain. 2 Ezra chapter 12, verse 26. From the sound of the prophecy, the first eaglehead is going to die in his bed, either from illness or maybe he'll be poisoned. Now, what do we know about the second and third eagleheads? Reading from Daniel 11 again, it says, Then he, the second eaglehead, shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, the United States, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Daniel chapter 11, verse 19. And then going back to 2 Ezra chapter 12, it says, For the last two eagleheads that remain shall be slain with the sword. For the sword of the one, the third eaglehead, shall devour the other, the second eaglehead. But at the last shall he fall through the sword himself. 2 Ezra chapter 12, verses 27 through 28. Based on these verses, it appears that the second eaglehead will return to the United States. And after his return, he will be murdered by the third eaglehead, who will then be murdered himself. And talking specifically about the third eaglehead, Daniel 11 says, Then shall stand up a raiser of taxes, the third eaglehead, in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Daniel chapter 11, verse 20. From these verses, it appears that the third eaglehead will raise taxes upon rising to power, but he will be murdered within a few days of his rise to power. Now, who will murder him? Well, remember, there are still two feathers left. And that brings us to the Antichrist. The Antichrist is expected to be the 19th feather, and he will be an individual person, but not a normal person. He will have supernatural abilities, including the ability to, and I quote, maketh fire come down from heaven. See Revelation chapter 13, verse 13. And he will try to pass himself off as God. He will destroy all secret combinations within days of his rise to power. He will give us reason to question everything we know about reality. He will rule the world with the 20th feather. And the 20th feather is thought to be the beast. It's thought that the beast will be the 20th and final feather. I won't say much about the beast now because of how weird it sounds. But I will say that when the scriptures talk about a mark of the beast, they're talking about that beast. To learn more about the Antichrist and the beast, I recommend you study Revelation chapter 13. And don't just read it, actually pray for the ability to understand it and be ready to take notes of thoughts and impressions you have, or whatever else you can do that'll best help you understand what you're reading. Now, at the end of the prophecy, reading from 2 Ezra 11 again, it says, And I beheld, and lo, as it were a roaring lion chased out of the wood. And I saw that he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle, and said, Appear no more, thou eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious heads, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed and may return, being delivered from thy violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. 2 Ezra chapter 11, verses 37, 45, and 46. So basically, a lion comes in and tells the eagle to go away. Now, what does the arrival of the lion represent? Well, it represents the partial fulfillment of the 10th article of faith, which says, "We believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the 10 tribes, that Zion, the New Jerusalem, will be built upon the American continent, that Christ will reign personally upon the earth, and that the earth will be renewed and receive its paradisiacal glory." 10th article of faith. The arrival of the lion represents the restoration of the 10 tribes that are mentioned above. Everything in the 10th article of faith, up through Zion being built on the American continent, will be fulfilled before the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, a little bit about the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes are groups of people who were hidden somewhere by God over 2,700 years ago. The scriptures say they were hidden in the north countries, but we don't know where the north countries are or what they are. And I won't say much more about the restoration of the 10 tribes now, only that it will rival the exodus of Israel from Egypt in how impactful and historical of an event it will be. The Antichrist will not fear the leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he will fear the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes will kick the Antichrist out of America. And after doing that, the 10 tribes will begin the construction of Zion, the New Jerusalem, on the American continent. So that's the end of the prophecy. So as promised, I'm going to talk more about Michael B. Rush. He is an LDS scholar and author who gave us the interpretation of Ezra's eagle that I have just shared with you. As of the time of me recording this video, he has written 4 books that talk about what the scriptures say about the last days. And these books are available to purchase on Amazon and on his website, thelost10tribes.com. His first book, A Remnant Shall Return, is available for free in audiobook form on podcasting platforms. So, if you want to try before you buy, you definitely have that option. He also has a YouTube channel that you can find by searching his name, Michael B. Rush, on YouTube. His YouTube channel consists of videos of him talking about these topics. In some videos, he's talking while he's out hiking. In others, he's talking at home and in his office. There are even a couple of videos where he's giving a presentation to a live audience. A lot of his videos are pretty long, but I found them to be very insightful and well worth my time. His website, thelost10tribes.com, also has some links to some good videos and articles you can check out. I'll leave links to both his website and his YouTube channel in the description. I'll also leave a link to a King James Bible website where you can read the Apocrypha and the chapters I mentioned in this video for free. Now at this point you might be wondering, how can you know if this is true? Especially if this is your first time hearing about it, and you've never heard it before from any leaders of the church. Well, Rush addressed that question in one of his books. He said, "Some may ask, if this is true, why haven't I heard about it before from the leaders of the church? This question is a great starting point, but a terrible destination. What do I mean by a terrible destination? Some use such questions as a means to disregard new information rather than as a launch point of investigation. For example, millions of God-fearing Christians have used some variation of this to dismiss the restored gospel, and yet it is true. Therefore, as you have now read this material and are in a position to ask yourself such questions, do so with both an open mind and the proper context." And to back this point up, he followed this with a quote from Elder David A. Bednar, which reads, "We should not expect the church as an organization to teach or tell us everything we need to know and do to become devoted disciples and endure valiantly to the end. Rather, our personal responsibility is to learn what we should learn, to live as we know we should live, and to become who the Master would have us become. And he said that in his General Conference talk in the April 2019 General Conference. Before I end this video, I'm going to leave you with some final thoughts. The prophecy of Ezra's eagle only scratches the surface of what is going to happen in the coming days. Learning about Ezra's eagle is a good starting point for learning about the events of the coming days, but it is by no means meant to be an ending point. God wants to teach us about his mysteries and about what will happen in the coming days, but he's not going to give us this information if we're not actively seeking it. We will know by January 20th, 2025, the next presidential inauguration day in the United States, if Rush is correct with his interpretation of the prophecy. Rush has even said that he hopes that he's wrong, because if he's right, things are going to get really crazy really quickly. With that being said, you should not put all your eggs in one basket when making plans for the future. Because, with the possibility that this interpretation of the prophecy is wrong, you should not center your life around it being correct. Only know that it might be correct. In the meantime, you should live your life in the best way you know how, and strive to become who the Master would have you become, like Elder Bednar said. If the prophet or any of the apostles should say anything that contradicts what I've just talked about, or what Michael B. Rush has talked about, you should obviously go with what they say. And remember, the Holy Ghost, a member of the Godhead, is the one we should all be seeking to be taught by, especially since we are going to need his constant and guiding influence in the coming days. And with that, I will end the video. Thank you for watching. Hopefully it made sense, and hopefully this will light a fire in you that makes you want to dive deeper into the things I've just talked about. Subscribe if you want. I might make another video in the future if I feel compelled to do so. In the meantime, God bless.